Good evening, colleagues. Please take your seats. Take all your seats, please. Before starting our meeting today, I would like to express our solidarity with Spain. On 29 October, Spain was hit by dramatic floods that left more than 2,000 people dead and many others injured. Our thoughts and hearts go out to all those families who have lost their loved ones. We mourn the dramatic loss of life, and we stand in sympathy with all the people of Spain that have been affected by this catastrophe. Now, dear colleagues, we can start. Θα μιλήσω ελληνικά.
I'll be speaking Greek. Commissioner-designate, honorable members, I would like to welcome to this confirmation hearing Mr. Apostolos TZITZIKOSTAS, Commissioner-designate for Sustainable Transport and Tourism. I would like to remind you that in line with the Parliament's rules of procedure, during the evaluation meeting that we'll have later on, coordinators will have to state clearly whether they consider the candidate to be qualified both to be member of the college and to carry out the particular duties he has been assigned. As you all know, before the hearing, the Commissioner-designate replied to all the written questions, and the answers have been distributed to all members in all languages. I'd like to recall that the Committee on Legal Affairs assessed the question of potential or actual conflicts of interest and has raised no objection to the holding of the hearing. Now I will explain the structure of the confirmation hearing. First, the Commissioner-designate will make an opening statement of no longer than 15 minutes. He will then have 5 minutes at the end of the hearing for his closing statement. After the opening statement, we will turn to the questions from members, and they will be structured in 4 rounds. The first round will be for the Transport Committee political group coordinators with 5-minute slots each, with 1 minute for the question and 2 minutes for the answer from the Commissioner-designate, with a possibility of a follow-up question from the same member of no longer than 1 minute, with 1 minute for the reply from the Commissioner-designate. The second round will be for the members of the Transport Committee, with 3-minute slots each, 1 minute from the member and 2 from the Commissioner-designate. The third round will be for the chair of the ENVI Committee, which is the invited committee. There will be only 1 question with a 3-minute slot, 1 minute from the chair and 2 minutes from the Commissioner-designate. There will be a final round of questions by representatives of each political group in reverse order, again with 3-minute slots each, as I explained before. We have interpretation in 23 languages today. That means that all speakers can therefore use their own language. We would like to remind you that since we have interpretation, please speak clearly and not too quickly, but please make sure you don't exceed your allocated time. I would also like to inform you that this confirmation hearing is being web-streamed on the European Parliament's website, and that it will also be possible to access a video recording of the hearing on the same site within a few hours of the hearing. Commissioner-designate, we acknowledge your replies to the horizontal written questions and your readiness to cooperate with the European Parliament. This is particularly important in the context of the revision of the framework agreement between the European Parliament and the Commission, in particular regarding your commitment to be regularly present in committees and plenaries, to follow up on Parliament's legislative initiatives, and to share information in a timely manner with the Parliament as co-legislator and one of the arms of the budgetary authority. We count on the full implementation of these commitments and emphasize the Commission's role as an honest broker in all legislative procedures and the interinstitutional negotiations, ensuring equal treatment of Parliament and the Council. I equally count on your full cooperation to inform our committee in advance of all upcoming proposals with detailed justifications for those that require urgent action. This will ensure transparency and allow the Parliament to properly exercise its prerogatives. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to the Commissioner-designate for his opening statement. Let me point out that this should not last longer than 15 minutes. Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to offer my deepest and sincere condolences to the people in Valencia. I'm informed that the transport infrastructure has been heavily affected, and I want you to know that the Commission stands ready to support whenever it can. Honourable members, it is an immense privilege to present to you today my vision for sustainable transport and tourism that shape the lives of millions of Europeans and influence our continent's connectivity, economy, and environment. As regional governor, former parliamentarian, and committed European, I have the utmost respect for you, the elected representatives of the people of Europe. During my presidency at the European Committee of the Regions, I worked closely with members of the European Parliament, bringing the voices from the regions and cities of our Union to this very House. Now, I'm truly honored to be entrusted with a portfolio of sustainable transport and tourism. This not only aligns with this committee's remit, but brings close together two sectors that can work in great synergy to overcome the similar challenges they face, from competitiveness to climate change, from the need of skilled workers to investments. Coming from Greece, I know these challenges well, and I know that both sectors can contribute to competitiveness and regional development. As President von der Leyen said in this Parliament, Europe needs a new plan for sustainable prosperity and competitiveness. Transport and tourism are basic pillars to achieve both. Transport is a sector that has a huge potential with 1.4 million companies driving our economy, both SMEs and global champions, and I want to work with you in order to deliver results, reducing bureaucratic burden, boosting investment and innovation, increasing sustainability and developing climate-friendly technologies. The European automotive sector is the best example, having huge strategic importance but facing major challenges today. It has a trade surplus of 100 billion euros and 14 million jobs. We need concrete, transformative actions that build on the future clean industrial deal. When developing the EU Industrial Action Plan for the automotive sector, I will address the needs of the entire value chain, pulling all the levels of automotive competitiveness, from securing critical supply chains to ensuring affordability, and from infrastructure for refueling and recharging to fully exploiting automation and data. My goals are clear: defend our industry and its workers, reduce dependencies, create a level playing field, and fulfill our climate objectives. Not only for the automotive industry, but for all transport modes, especially maritime, where we must revive the historic European industry. Also, early in my mandate, I will present a strategy for European ports. In a volatile international environment, these gateways to international trade and prosperity must keep us connected to the world, but also economically independent and safe, while ensuring the transition towards a climate-friendly industry. Honourable members, competitiveness must build on sustainability. Transport is the only sector whose emissions continue to rise compared to 1990. To achieve climate neutrality by 2050, we need to implement the legislation that is already adopted, notably the Fit 55 package that you agreed on during the last legislature. You can count on me to support member states and companies in this crucial task of implementation. We also need to see where we can support the sector more in the transition on road, sea and air. Road transport is the largest contributor to pollution today. We must encourage greater use of zero-emissions cars and cleaner heavy-duty vehicles. One element is to accelerate emission reduction from corporate fleets, helping our cities fight against air pollution, but also creating a second-hand market for consumers and making zero-emission cars more affordable. Furthermore, I will continue to promote sustainable urban mobility. Today, the average driver in Europe spends 38 hours per day stuck in city rush hour traffic, 30 hours per year. Clean public transport can help us reclaim this time while cutting emissions. And I will closely follow the application of the European Cycling Declaration for which this Parliament fought, and I congratulate you for that. That includes improving data, creating a network of national cycling points and supporting the cycling industry. We must also increase our efforts to shift freight transport to more sustainable modes, such as rail and inland waterways. Now, achieving zero emissions will be harder for aviation and maritime, and we know this. Here we need to support the production and the affordability of sustainable fuels and electrification where possible. To support the decarbonization of the sector, I will come forward with a sustainable transport investment plan in 2025. And because climate change does not stop at our borders, I will work with ICAO and IMO to pursue an equally ambitious global agenda in coordination with the member states. To be truly competitive, to seize the opportunities offered by digitalization, real-time data and artificial intelligence, and promote the green and digital transition, disruptive technologies are also key. Innovation has given us a proud history, and we must have a proud future. I want the European Union to be the place where new ideas are developed, tested, and rapidly brought to the market. This requires a supportive regulatory framework. We did this for drones and remote digital control towers for aviation. We must do it again for other cutting-edge technologies, such as driverless cars, urban air taxis, and Hyperloop. Honourable members, the Draghi and Letta reports point to transport as a catalyst for our economic and social life. A primary focus will be completing the 243,000 kilometers trans-European transport network, the TEN-T, by the agreed deadlines. Rail is central to the TEN-T and one of the greenest modes of transport available. Completing the railway network and connecting cities by high-speed rail is, for me, a top priority. Doing so will cut travel time, for example, from Hamburg to Copenhagen from 4 hours, 20 minutes to 2 hours and a half. So next year, if confirmed as Commissioner, I will put forward a plan to connect EU capitals and large cities by high-speed rail. And I also want to improve rail connectivity overall, so that no region is left behind. Citizens and businesses, don't hesitate to switch to rail, including night trains, when the connections are affordable, convenient and reliable. Rail can also carry more freight, work better across borders, more in synergy with road transport. Transport does not only connect us inside the Union, but also beyond. Extending the TEN-T network will help us integrate future EU member states, Ukraine, Moldova, Western Balkans into the single market, helping to protect them and us from future shocks. It also secures connectivity for peripheral member states. Transport plays a key role in our security architecture. A good example are the EU-Ukraine solidarity lanes and the road agreement with Ukraine. And I'm convinced and committed to further work with our Ukrainian partners for the benefit of both the EU's and the Ukraine's economies. Finally, developing military mobility will also reduce our vulnerabilities. The need for dual-use infrastructure has never been greater. The single market is the heart of our union. We need to tear down national regulatory barriers where they persist. We still have fragmentation in our skies and in the ground. A train between Paris and Cologne must comply with 6 different signaling systems. A car rented in Venice today can only be dropped in Ljubljana for a fee of more than 1,000 euros. Why? It's time to make our single market really single. For rail, I will present to you in the first year of my mandate a proposal for a single digital booking and ticketing regulation, improving existing obligations in this area. Passengers' rights must evolve accordingly, offering protection for an entire journey, including those involving different operators. And let me now move to the other major sector, tourism, which is a major economic activity today in Europe, with wide-ranging impact on economic growth, employment, and social development. Europe is the #1 tourist destination. We have more than 3 million active micro-enterprises, many of them family-run business. In accommodation, restaurants, passengers transport, and travel agencies, more sustainability and resilience will ensure that tourists keep coming and the sector keeps thriving. I will continue our efforts to strengthen the ecosystem's resilience while also encouraging regional and local authorities to evolve into effective destination management organizations to address imbalanced visitor flows. After consultation with all the relevant stakeholders, I will present a strategy for sustainable tourism to support the industry while preserving the environment and well-being of the local communities. Also, I will cooperate with you, with the TRAN Tourism Committee. Mesdames et messieurs, les députés.
Ladies and gentlemen, honourable members, I haven't talked about the serious worker shortages that we have that slow down growth in the transport sector. On the European level, we must harness the tools available to us to train and prepare workers to the new demands and opportunities linked to these professions. In the first few days of my mandate, I will organize dialogue with young people. I want to hear about their expectations. I want to know what we can do to make sure that transport-related professions are more appealing. We can already accomplish a lot, like to adopt new legislation on driving licenses and to support legislation for reskilling and training of workers, and to continue supporting the Women in Transport EU platform in order to encourage women and young people to seek out jobs in these sectors. I want to be crystal clear. We will not tolerate the exploitation and mistreatment of workers in the EU. I will make sure that European legislation is respected and implemented in a uniform manner.
An issue. Accessibility and affordability of transport. In 22, EU households spend 12.5% of their budget on transport. Transport needs to be affordable for everyone in every region of our Union. Notably in rural areas, public transport is key for development, and I will present a recommendation on transport poverty to ensure that the funds available for transport are spent wisely. And I want to make sure that the Social Climate Fund addresses real needs so that nobody is left behind. Finally, the issue that comes and must come above all others is safety. In Greece, we have suffered an unbearable tragedy. The Tembi rail accident in February 23 should not have happened. Such an accident should never happen again anywhere in Europe. So safety will be my #1 priority. And I will be strict with all member states because we have common rules and tools to prevent such accidents today. But they are not always respected or deployed. And this is unacceptable. And I will work to change this with you by pursuing and supporting the member states to implement all the safety measures, not only in rail, but also on our roads, where 20,000 people still lose their lives every year. Dear members of the European Parliament, I will not overpromise today. Credibility comes with actions, not words. But I can promise you one thing. I will do my best to meet your expectations, the expectations of the people of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS. We turn now to the first round of questions from TRAN coordinators. I would ask everyone to strictly respect the speaking time. We have a long list of speakers. Otherwise, I would need to switch off the microphones, so allow all the speakers we have to allow to take the floor and finish the hearing on time. I pass now the floor to our first coordinator speaker, Mr. Giesecke from EPP. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS. As EPP, we would like to hear your clear commitment to our guiding principles. We must enable transport and tourism instead of limiting it. Choice and technology neutrality instead of imposing a mode or a technology. Cost efficiency instead of cost blindness. European solutions wherever they have a clear added value, instead of national egoism, because it has always been that way. We have no doubt that you are sharing these principles. We have no doubt that a clear majority of groups here in this group is sharing them. But transport bashing and forbidding have been en vogue in the parliamentary term. This term, we are facing anti-Europeans rejecting common sense solutions only because they are European. We need you to be both, together with the majority in this committee, pro-transport and tourism and pro-European.
Thank you. Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS.
Thank you very much, Mr. Giesecke. Let me assure you that I'm a convinced pro-European. And this is why, after all, I want to be part of this college and contribute my vision. Now, I fully share your assessment. Transport and tourism are two sectors that really influence our lives, especially transport. Every family in Europe uses one mode of transport on a daily basis, and tourism brings us together. However, transport and tourism have common challenges, have common sensitivities, and above all, what you need to make sure is to make them sustainable. So on technological neutrality, we need to use all the technologies and solutions that we have. And we need to work on using more rail and inland waterways, make transport modes cleaner, In aviation and maritime, we need to invest in sustainable fuels. And this is why I announced earlier I will create the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan to boost their uptake. But I will also take my efforts to ICAO and IMO because global problems need global solutions. And of course, on road transport, let's be clear, we have CO2 standards, we have specific goals, and we have to stick to the plan. 2025, 15% reduction, 35, 100% reduction. The inclusion, of course, of e-fuels will be ensured as part of the foreseen revision in 2026. But we also need charging infrastructure, and I will work in the remits of the TNT network to make sure that we have charging infrastructures, because otherwise the citizens, the travelers, will not trust electric vehicles. When it comes to China, the heavy subsidies that they have chosen as a path is not something we will accept. And this is why we imported duties. But we will also support the EU manufacturing. And everything
Mr.
that I told you now
Commissioner-designate,
will
you
be
have to
included
finish,
in the
please.
EU industrial plan.
Mr. Giesecke, you have follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. Many thanks for that solid answer. I'm sure my EPP colleagues will come back to what you have said with more specific questions. Let me open the other overarching topic with a plea. Please take cutting red tape seriously. Recently, a directive from DG Move told us that around 20% of the EU acquis communautaire would be transport-related. I'm not sure this is only a good thing. Transport companies, public administrations, simple citizens are drowning in rules and forms and guidelines. They deal with paper where it could be digital, and they ask us for help. So please tell us, how will you be cutting red tape? Not in abstract terms, but very concretely. Will it be 1 in, 1 out, 1 in, 2 out? How will you reduce the number of hours spent on compliance and legal advice? How will you bring down the numbers of euros lost by bureaucracy? And will you stick to the principle of no proposal without impact assessment?
Thank you. Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS.
Thank you, Mr. Giesecke. I want you to know that I take simplification and burden reduction very seriously. The EU acquis in transport is vast, but this is a good thing if you think about it, because we rest on a solid European legal framework. Of course, we need to cut down the obsolete requirements. Today, for example, you know that only 1% of cross-border operations in road transport are paperless. Only 1%. Pilots and drivers today, they use certificates in paper. To rent a car, you still need to go to the guichet to get a counter approval. So this needs to stop. We need to move to new technologies that we will incorporate. So I want to put forward an initiative to make transport paperless by 2030. In addition, I very much believe in the need to cut all the obsolete obligations that today exist. As you know, President von der Leyen has said that we have to cut 25% of obligations, reporting obligations, and 35% for SMEs, and we will do that. But we've done that, and we know how to do it. One last
Mr.
thing.
Commissioner, please finish.
One warning. We cannot play with safety, and this is why I will be very careful in cutting requirements concerning safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I beg you to keep the time. Now, Mr. Danielson from the S&D. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner-designate. In your written answers, you rightly emphasize the importance of working conditions, with focus on implementing and enforcing current rules. We fully support this, of course, but given the gravity of the problem in the sector, we need other initiatives as well. Therefore, firstly, will you commit to conducting a comprehensive evaluation of working conditions across all transport modes within your first 100 days, identifying challenges and suggesting solutions to address them? And secondly, looking specifically at aviation, can you commit to revising the air service regulation to tackle the problem caused by precarious work, including bogus self-employment, abusive subcontracting, and the misuse of wet leasing? And thirdly, in the maritime sector, will you commit to take some action to ensure all crew, regardless of nationality or residence, that work on vessels operating between European ports also receive European wages and working conditions? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS.
Thank you, Mr. Danielson. First of all, let me start by saying that transport workers are the greatest asset for us. They are our real heroes. We saw their work during the COVID pandemic. They kept the economy running. They kept our lives going. You know as well, very well, that there are great working shortages in the transport sector, which we need to deal with. So we need to make better working conditions for them. And indeed, we are monitoring these working conditions on a constant basis. However, I like your idea. And so, yes, we will do a comprehensive evaluation, just like you proposed, on the working conditions to address possible gaps so that the profession can become more attractive. Because if we want to solve the problem of the shortages in the transport sector, we need to make the profession more attractive. And of course, by saying that, we also need to make sure that we have strengthened the enforcement of the already existing rules that are sometimes unevenly enforced along member states. And I will make sure that we have an even enforcement. And of course, I will look into extending the European Labour Authority remits into transport workers as well. And I will talk to this. I will talk about this with the Commissioner on social issues. We will put smarter and digital technologies to help us in this respect. And of course, answering to your question very directly, yes, I will bring it early in my mandate, the aviation review, the 1008, which has been pending because of COVID and Ukraine issues, and we will deal with many issues, working relations, standards, and also issues like the home base and the operational base.
Thank you. Follow question, Mr. Danielson.
Thank you very much for the answers, firstly. Then perhaps looking at another mode of transport. As you know, in road transport, we have had severe problems with the proper enforcement of the mobility package. So building on your first answer, how will you ensure that member states fulfill their obligations to conduct, for example, regular roadside checks and implement effective national control system, which should be already with the EU requirements? And then secondly, after the judgment of the European Court of Justice, how do you intend to go forward concerning the return of the truck principle and provision? And finally, and perhaps on another note, there are, as you know, a few transport dossiers stuck in Council. Do you foresee that you will take action to get movement on any of them? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Danielson, but in 1 minute I don't have the time to respond to all that. I will try, though, to say that, of course, when it comes to the return of the trucks, you know, we had the decision of the Court of Justice, which we respect. I don't see any need for any new legislation at this time. After all, you know that the Commission opposed the proposal from the very beginning because it caused a lot of burden on the environment and on our roads. However, I will assess the working situation, the conditions of our workers under this new rule, and if there is any need, I will intervene to make changes. But I don't see any reason at this point. And when it comes to maritime, I want again to reassure you that I will also look in the European Labour Authority extension of its remits and effective enforcement. But because it's maritime, we need to go global. So I will take it to the international level, IMO, because we need to see passenger ferries and seafarers in the ships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Haider from the Patriots, the floor is yours.
VW is closing 3 factories in Germany. Mercedes wants to sell all its dealerships. There's a standstill of production at BMW. Fiat is closing factories in Poland and Italy, and Audi, Ford, Volvo, etc. are either closing or reducing production. So the auto industry is dying because of this disastrous Green Deal. So is the Commission and the Parliament, if they were just reasonable and using common sense, they would have stopped the Green Deal disaster long ago, but that's not the case. So, and if you read the letter from Mrs. von der Leyen, you basically give up all hope of having any reason and common sense in this matter. Considering the destruction of the automotive industry, what measures are you going to take vis-a-vis these, what steps are you going to take to either rescue and support this key branch so that we can ensure jobs, innovation, competition, prosperity in Europe in the long term? Thank you.
Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS.
Thank you, Mr. Haider. It's obvious that I disagree with you. However, I would like to say that the rules are very clear, and the rules were set years ago. And so there is market clarity and certainty and stability, because exactly we have these measures in place throughout these years. And so the companies had and still have 11 years to make sure that we will get there progressively. First of all, you know that the 2025 targets are allowing hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrids, improvement on conventional vehicles. So we are not talking about a disruption of the automotive sector here. We don't have full electrification by 2025. So we cannot slow down what the projects of the automotive industry are already in place. What we need to do is to help the automotive sector make the transition, go to the CO2 goals. How we will do that? By creating a market, by creating cheaper vehicles, accessible to citizens, by putting the infrastructure that is needed so that citizens are confident and feel safe to take a car to go on a trip, a long-distance trip. And this is how they will increase sales. And don't forget that by having these targets, Europe will be able to continue to have a leading role and be a protagonist in industry in the world. Why? Because we will invest heavy on new high technologies and greening technologies. We shift the model to survive in the European Union.
Follow question.
In diesem Haus.
In the Parliament, a bad habit has developed of which essentially excludes democratically elected representatives from right-wing parties. And what happens that representatives from my group are excluded from different committees and the Bureau in the Parliament. This is the cordon sanitaire. So also your countryman, Mrs. Wasserman Vandenidi, has also been using this shabby game and used this game in this very committee. So now your reputation precedes you, and as a governor, it's said that you've always tried to find a balance between different political forces, and you have not been led into using such a thing as the cordon sanitaire. So my question, are you prepared to work in an unbiased way with the Patriots for Europe group? And are you going to use the cordon sanitaire? You can just answer simply yes or no. That would be enough for me.
Thank you. I want to be very clear with you. I am here and I'm ready to hear and discuss with every member of this Parliament. However, I will work with those who share our common European values and are willing to work with me constructively in order to forge European unity, to defend European interests, and to make Europe stronger. So this European unity will always be based on our values. European democracy, respect of the rule of law, and a just, a lasting peace in Ukraine, respecting its territorial integrity.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Zile from the ECR, please.
First of all, Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS, where we are united in TRAN committees, and we wish to increase in hierarchy of the new Commission transport policy as such. We can measure it also by TEN-T progress on core network particularly, which requires, of course, pretty financially rich connecting Euro Facility 3. And also, otherwise, we will not have high-speed trains connecting capitals, even we don't have, in some capitals, train at all until 2030, because this is the last call for CEF2. It means there would be no money from CEF almost 3 years, and then we have a new MFF. Would you fight for CEF very much, not to make it a refurbishment in MFF? And also, as a second issue related, of course, you mentioned military mobility, but this is only one example when you said about defense challenges in a transport policy. Would you say a bit more about it? How do you see new challenges coming from this? Challenges in transport policy, but would you name other challenges coming to transport policy coming from the war in Ukraine, in the European continent?
Thank you very much, Mr. Zile. First of all, allow me to say that the completion of the TEN-T network is of utmost importance. It was highlighted under the Draghi and the Letta reports. It is something that we all understand. Without the TEN-T network, there is no connection, there is no free movement, there is no single market, okay? So I will fight for the completion of the TEN-T network, not only the core TEN-T network by 2030, but also the extended one by 2040 and the comprehensive one by 2040, in order to connect all regions and all places so no one can feel left out. Now, you know that the funds for this endeavor are huge. Only for the core network, we need 515 billion euros. So, of course, we will fight during the negotiations on the next MFF. I mean, we will negotiate and we will try to get as much as we can for infrastructure work. And of course, we will have to see how we will use national member states funding, how we will incorporate private public partnerships, and of course, private investment. And we will involve banks, the EIB, the European Investment Bank as well. Now, in military mobility, I've already met with the Commissioner-designate for Defense. We discussed it because there are common interests in this project. It's corridors of dual use. 95%, 99% of the times it's used for citizens, but we need to be ready to have infrastructure that will allow our troops to move, heavy vehicles to move. We have to have bridges that can withstand heavy trucks and military equipment. And also, one last thing, I will have a new military mobility action plan that I will present to you early in the mandate after cooperating with NATO.
Thank you. The follow-up question?
You mentioned also about the new strategy for European ports. I will give you examples. There is a new challenges coming from the war in Ukraine because some Baltic Sea ports inside of EU, they are losing freight completely and cargoes. And St. Petersburg, for example, is growing up very significantly. Do you see anything what could be done in this framework? Not after 3 or 4 years, but immediately. And the second issue, would you agree to communicate with the commissioner responsible for the, for the competition and state aid rules in aviation sector, for example? Airlines coming out of the COVID and other crises, like shortages of new Boeing aircrafts and so on, they are, some of them are losing market shares and some of them are concentrating a power. Do you see some difficulties here in aviation policy if it will continue like that with a different state aid, how to say, judgments on aviation since COVID?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Zile. Well, first of all, about the port strategy, as I said in my opening speech, I will present an EU port strategy, which I think is very, very important, because after the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, we know very well by now how important also after the influence of third countries in our ports, like China, have created issues that we need to be very, very careful. So I will push for an EU port strategy. The Minister report as well is highlighting the importance of maritime security, of transport infrastructure, military mobility, digital infrastructure as well. So the exact scope of this EU port strategy will be, one, to obtain strategic independence from mainly third countries and also including cybersecurity threats, resilience of transport infrastructure and connections, and also the supply chains. I don't have time, but I'm sure we will elaborate in a little bit on the e-port strategy.
Please don't make me use the hammer very often. Thank you very much. I give now the floor to Mr. Etkin from the Renew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Commissioner-designate, first of all, apologies for having arrived some minutes late. I had a flight, so. And this brings me to the topic. Colleague Danielson already asked you about 1008 service regulation, air service regulation, but normally we discuss about this as a package. So together with airport charges and slots, which were included in the smart and sustainable mobility strategy. Do you think that those will come up? How do you see this? And do you think we need an update of the EU aviation strategy first? And second, in refuel aviation, there is a requirement for the Commission to assess possible additional measures to increase the supply of sustainable aviation fuels. Notably, the possibility of setting up or recognizing a system of tradability of SAF, which is called book and claim system. Are you in favor of such a system, and would you see the necessity to include it in a broader liquid fuel strategy?
Thank you, Mr. Otian. It's a very important question indeed. We know very well that in aviation and maritime we have different goals, different ways of measuring the goals that we need to achieve, and we have different fuels. So we need to indeed work very hard, and this is why I will create the STIP, the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan, in order to help get investments that will heavily get involved in the creation of these alternative fuels, mainly for air and maritime. Now, you know that the Refuel EU for aviation gives great level of flexibility already to the air carriers. So I don't see that we should move now into adopting a book and claim system. Let's wait first, because you know very well that SAF will only start the EU refuel. No, it's 2 minutes. So I get 1 more minute free. Yeah. So, thank you very much, Madam President. I was saying that the EU refuel aviation will start the 1st of January of 2025, in 2 months from now. So let's see how this evolves. Let's see what the trend of the economy will be concerning air transport. And after we see that, if indeed there are discussions about moving to a book and claim system, we can see it then. But I want to remind you that during our discussions the Commission's discussions with different stakeholders, they had different point of views on the issue because SAF certificates can be vulnerable to fraud and to double claims. So we need to be very careful. There will be a report coming soon from the Commission on the book and claim system.
Thank you. Follow-up question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will be quick on this one. It concerns air passenger rights. You know that Commission has made several proposals for strengthening the air passenger rights, but Regulation 261, the core regulation remains untouched, even though this is the regulation where we have the most complaints from passengers. How do you see the situation on 261, and do you see the need for an update of the air passenger rights?
Yes, Mr. Etienne, thank you for your question. First of all, we need to make progress on 3 already existing proposals, okay? We have 2 from 2023, the one on enforcement and the other on multi-modal passenger rights. And we have the one from 2013 on air passenger rights. And by the way, it's very important that the European Union was the first continent that brought passenger rights. And so we have raised the bar very high. So what we need to do at this point is, since the 2013 remains valid, work along with the other 2 that we need to discuss and pass, and engage that we will facilitate a compromise for these 2 agreements. So I'll count on your support because I'm willing to bring this very soon in my mandate, and I will tell you later how I will connect the passenger rights to other initiatives I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we pass the floor to Mr. Tekedov from the Greens.
Thank you, Commissioner-designate. You mentioned it. High-speed rail network and attractive night train services, we need to boost the European rail sector. To get people on the train, it must be simple for passengers. We understand that you will propose 3 initiatives. First, the single digital booking and ticketing regulation. Will it include making all ticketing data freely available in the market? Or let me rephrase, will we get a system of a single ticket in case of bookings with several operators, or a system of multiple tickets with guaranteed passenger rights? Second, a potential amendment to the rail passenger rights legislation. How will you ensure that passenger rights are protected for journeys involving different operators and for cross-border journeys? And third, a multimodal digital mobility services initiative. Can you confirm that this will be a legislative and mandatory initiative?
Many questions. I will try to answer as quickly as I can. Well, to give you a short answer, it will be yes. The exact scope, of course, will be decided with the new college, but my intention is to bring a single digital booking and ticketing regulation as soon as possible, which will benefit the European citizens, and I will bring it by 2025. Now, what is this about? This is about ending this difficulty that passengers have, that they cannot book one single ticket for one connection if it's cross-regional or cross-border. So you will be able to book a ticket from one country to another or to a third country by train, one ticket, one click on your cell phone, just like it happens today with airplanes and air tickets. It's unbelievable that in 2024 we don't have that, okay? So with this, I will have also the multimodal initiative that will accompany it. The multimodal will mean that you will be able to have this single ticketing for different modes. For example, using an airplane on one leg of your trip and a train for the second leg of your trip. And then, along with these 2 initiatives, we will bring, of course, passenger rights changes because you understand that we need to protect them under this new initiatives that will come. It will create a new reality on the ground. So we will have this initiatives coming. They will come quickly, they will come accompanying one the other, and we will protect the travelers, which, by the way, and allow me to take the opportunity to say that, we need to do something else as well. Increase the awareness of the passengers on the existing rules.
Thank you. Second, I want to stress a different topic. We need to build up the European electric car industry. 2/3 of new cars are corporate. You have announced proposals for clean corporate fleets. This has the potential to boost the demand for electric cars in the EU and, as you mentioned, also the second-hand market for electric vehicles. Therefore, can you commit to making this initiative a legislative proposal? And furthermore, in order to meet our climate targets for the road sector, ambitious targets for the electrification of corporate fleets are essential. Can you commit to mandatory electrification targets within the Clean Corporate Fleets proposal? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teketov. I like corporate fleets as an idea, and I will support this initiative. We all know by today that more than half of the cars in our roads today are corporate. So if we go with corporate fleets, we have two advantages. The first one is that these cars have high mileage, so they help a lot the environment if we do it. The second, it will create a second-hand market for the citizens, therefore reducing the prices of electric vehicles. So I'm very keen on taking on board the electric vehicles, yeah. So I'm very keen on taking on board the corporate fleet. It's an issue of the college. I cannot today tell you if this will be by incentives, by taxation, but I cannot exclude legislative action.
Thank you very much. Now I pass the floor to Mrs. Kilonen from the left.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear Commissioner-designate, dear colleagues. Commissioner will be responsible for the correct application of EU law and standards across the EU. This is of utmost importance to the left group because the correct application of EU law can save life. You said that safety is very important to you. Unfortunately, late or non-application of EU standards can cost lives, as we have seen for the horrifying railway accident of Tempe in Greece. This horror could have been avoided providing EU regulation if it had been properly applied. The lesson of this catastrophe still need to be learned in order to avoid the same fatal mistakes. Here again, EU law should apply and provide that the inquiry is made by a full independent body and in full transparency, which is still not the case in whole EU. And that worries me a lot. I love transport safety. And I hope that same heart is inside our new designate.
Ms. Kilonen, I couldn't agree more with you. And I say this because, as I stated in my opening speech, I witnessed the tragedy that we had in Greece. So safety, rest assured, will be my #1 priority. Exactly because I am coming from Greece and we suffered from this tragedy. So the first thing I will do is engage with member states. Make sure that they understand the rules, that they implement the European rules, that they enable systems like the ERTMS, with which we can avoid all the accidents that have happened these last years all across the European continent, and that they will follow strictly the guidelines and the timelines set by the Commission. Rail safety, for me, is a top priority, and I will help all the member states, to take the action needed on security, on safety of the rail, in order to minimize the chances of having such accidents again in the future.
Follow-up question?
Chair, I go to the Baltic Sea. It is also a security issue. Operating conditions of the region are critical for the entire EU internal market and security of supply. What actions does the Commission intend to take to ensure the security of the Baltic Sea region, especially considering the security risks caused by the Russian shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea and increased GPS interference? What concrete measures does the Commission intend to take to ensure the continuity of the Baltic Sea roads, even in crisis situation?
Thank you, Ms. Kyllönen. It's a very, very important issue, the issue you're raising, and I want you to know that, first of all, I fully support the sanctions against Russia, and that I take shadow fleets issue very, very seriously. As you know, it is up to the member states to implement all the rules and to safeguard that this is not happening. I will be following very closely this matter, and of course, if I see that there is no compliance, I will act decisively against any member state. I want to be clear about that. Why? Because it's not only about maritime safety, but it is also about the environment. If we have an accident, we will have real issues to deal with. So, I will push to make the requirement of proof of marine insurance mandatory, so that this way we can put the spotlight on suspicious vessels, and I will also engage with IMO to monitor even better using digitalization to be able to survey our waters in a better way. I will use also the European Maritime Safety Agency for that, because it is of utmost importance.
Thank you. I pass now the floor to Mr. Stoyanov from the ESN.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak in Bulgarian. Уважаеми господин кандидат комисар.
Dear nominee commissioner, among your future priorities as a future transport commissioner and in the context of your plan to improve the connectivity of European cities through different modes of transport, including night trains, you also have an idea to make a digitalized system for ticket issuing. How exactly are you going to ensure that the regions in Europe are interconnected, especially those regions that are lagging behind in terms of infrastructure? And also, it is important in the context of dramatic economic imbalances between various regions. What are the instruments you are going to employ? And what will your strategy be in terms of multimodal transport? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Stoyanov. This issue is very dear to me. After all, I am presently the governor of a big region in Greece, which is not the capital region. So I know very much how it is to have a need for connections. And I worked these last 10 years in my region as a governor to make sure that we are connected. So we constructed roads and we managed to increase the flights and the connections, also in maritime and in our airports. So indeed, I agree with you that, and I'm sure you all agree, that it's very important that no one is left behind. So, having said that, we have the TNT core network, which will be concluded by 2030. And then I will start already working on the next project, the extended network, by 2040, and the comprehensive one as well later. There we will give responses to the connections of regions. My goal is to have an adequate connection for every region and every corner of the European Union. Of course, this will not probably happen with high-speed rail. Okay, it's understandable. But I will, and we will, find ways to connect all these regions. How will we do that? We will do that, of course, with CEF funding, and we will also do that with cohesion funding. I already discussed and have a clear view now of how we can see that cohesion funding could be used for infrastructure in order to respond to that. My goal is to have no one left out of the European project in transport, and I will work very hard for that because, again, I believe that this affects our single market, our economy, and the people's connectivity.
You have follow-up question, Mr. Stoyanov?
How will you ensure that there will be less but better legislation, sectoral legislation? And what incentives are you going to introduce for member states to be more active in the implementation of the interconnectivity plan? Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stoyanov. There was a problem. I did not hear your question. Please repeat.
How will you ensure that there will be less but better legislation related to the sector? And secondly, what incentives are you going to introduce so that member states could be more active working in the area of interconnectivity? Thank you.
Well, I will tell you that I will continue, of course, working with member states on the enforcement of the fourth mobility railway package. I'm sorry, because you asked about rail, correct? Ensuring that there is enough choice, and of course, regulation of the use of railway capacity, which is another issue that we need to deal with. As I said earlier, the single digital booking and ticketing regulation, revisions to the rail passenger rights regulation that we said earlier, plan for an ambitious European high-speed rail, an action plan to boost long-distance and cross-border passenger rail, and, you know, the very important issue of having harmonized systems. Today, the gauge between countries or even regions is different, so it does not allow a train to go from one country to the other. We need to do a very big plan, making the gauge common for all European countries.
Thank you very much. Now we have finished the first round. We pass directly to the second round of questions. The TRAN members can ask a question for 1 minute, and Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS will reply in 2 minutes. There is no follow-up questions, and I have to beg one more time to respect the speaking time because we have a long list of speakers. I pass directly to the first speaker, Mrs. Zofia Kircher from the EPP, for 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner-designate, how will you promote a shift from road to rail? All of us want rail freight to double by 2050. And in your written answers, you focus on a completion of the Trans-European Transport Network. And you're completely right. If the rail infrastructure is not ready, then we will not succeed in shifting traffic to rail. Therefore, we need you to be tough on member states to deliver their obligations. Beyond infrastructure, various national regulations hinder rail freight transport. The harmonization of these regulations would boost rail freight immediately. For example, introduce English as a fallback language for train drivers. Currently, train drivers have to speak the language of every single country they are passing through. And the executive director of ERA, Josef Doppelbauer, complained about the absurdity of having the following situation: cargo trains stopping at borders to switch drivers. The list could be on and has to be solved. So, Commissioner-designate, when will you take action and present a proposal to address the issue?
Thank you very much, Ms. Kircher. We agree that we need to promote the model shift. I think we all agree here. And of course, the sustainable and smart mobility strategy is exactly one of its pillars. We have the TNT and the implementation of the existing rules that, of course, we are all working on. Of course, you know that in order to promote the increase of rail use, we need, first of all, a plan on an ambitious high-speed rail network. This will facilitate citizens and freight as well, and it will be something that will increase the shift. Second, I believe that the new digital ticketing regulation that we will bring will also help the shift. And thirdly, we need to improve the rules that you know very well on the use of railway capacity, because this is also a problem in many member states today. And of course, enforce existing rules, because we have rules there. Huh? So, I believe that the Combined Transport Directive, the increased multimodal and intermodal transport are both proposals that will help us towards this direction. Now, we do understand that there is a need for support measures that would ensure a level playing field, so that no mode of transport has a better dealing, if you want, but it's rather on a single level playing field. There we have the energy taxation directive that is here, and of course the work that I will do with ICAO and IMO for the other two modes to make sure that there's a level playing field. On the language, I will tell you that we need to improve the certification of drivers, ensuring the cross-border mobility of them, and propose a revision of the current trained drivers directive, where we will see what is the best way to address the issue of the language.
Thank you. Mr. François Calfon from the S&D.
Commissaire-désigné, je vais m'exprimer en français.
Thank you very much. I'll speak French. Decarbonising transport cannot be done by deindustrialising. It's so important for employers. We would like to have more taxes on Chinese vehicles, and we want to have greater filtering and screening of foreign investment. Now, you intend to provide support for the automotive sector and for maritime. What will your support for the automotive sector look like? Now, if we look at stereotypes, it's not employees that are the problem. And then when it comes to electric vehicles, could there be a leasing scheme like the one we have in France? Now on shipping. Shipping is such an important sector. 80% of the world's trade goes through ships. So a lot of this cargo comes from Asia. But how will you support European shipbuilders and ship owners so that these vessels are built and repaired in Europe? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. We need indeed to protect our industry from unfair competition and for dependent on, we need not to be dependent on foreign partners. You know very well that in the automotive industry, we have 14 million people working, and we cannot risk that. Also, we have had in the past a bad example of not taking measures against third countries' influences and allowing them to infiltrate in the market with different levels of competition. I'm talking about the solar panels. We all remember what happened in Europe with the solar panels. We were a leading force, and then suddenly, with no measures, we found ourselves being left behind. So this, we have to learn from our mistakes. We cannot allow this to happen again, and this is why it is very important. The Commission in October imposed an anti-subsidy duties on electric vehicles imported by China, because China is heavily subsidizing their cars, so it's an unequal competitiveness, which we cannot allow. So I fully support this initiative. When it comes to the maritime, I will tell you that indeed maritime and shipment is a great pride for Europe for decades. I will bring a maritime industrial strategy that we will deal with this issue concretely, on how to gain leadership in new growth segments, on how to maintain leadership, on how to use our competitive advantages in shipment, and of course in create better conditions for the European industry and its workers.
Mr. Jonski from the EPP, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak in Polish.
I would like to express my full support to the development of the trans-European transport networks, TNT, in particular rapid road that would connect Kiev and Berlin via Łódź and Warsaw. This is a key initiative, not only because it will link societies, people and economies, but it will also be important for military purposes. It will be supporting us in supporting our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. Would you care to develop this issue a bit further? How would you imagine that these corridors could be financed, those routes that link east with west? And second question, DG Klim has developed a number of legal initiatives, in particular ETS in air transport and CO2 emissions in road transport, which has contributed to the current crisis in this sector. How would you ensure that DG Move would be of decisive influence, would have decisive influence in developing such proposals?
Thank you, Mr. Jonski. Two very interesting questions. Thank you. When it comes to the TNT network, I tell you that it's a priority for the connection of the European Union with Ukraine. It's a top priority. There are already 4 European transport corridors at this point, including the North Sea Baltic corridor, of course. But we will need to work on the rail connection, and not only the rail, but the connection generally to be better. You know that from Berlin to Warsaw, this part is already in the core network, which is due in 2030. The Warsaw-Kiev part is already included in the extended network of the TNT that will end by 2040. And I will make sure that this is a first priority to develop on a timely manner this network. Also, I would like to inform you, that I'm sure you know already, that there is an issue with the gauge between the lines of the trains in the Ukraine side and even some countries of East in the EU with the rest of the EU. And we need to work on that a lot. It's very costly, but we need to do it, because otherwise trains cannot move from one place to the other. I will work very close with Germany, with Poland, with Ukraine to make sure that these public works are being done. And of course, this ambitious plan for high-speed connections is going to be placed there as well. Now, how we will collaborate? The principle of collegiality. Mr. Jonsky, you know we are co-missioners. We are sharing our missions, co-missioners. So we will work together very closely. We have already discussed on these issues, and I assure you that all decisions are taken in college collectively.
Mrs. Anna Maria Kissint from the Patriots.
Grazie. Thank you very much. In the previous term, the European Commission extended the ETS to the maritime sector, which meant that European transshipment ports were at a huge disadvantage, especially those in the Mediterranean, while those outside Europe in North Africa and Turkey had a competitive edge, and other ports were at a disadvantage compared to British ports. You come from Greece, Commissioner, so you know how harmful this has been to our ports. The corrective measures in the ETS directive are not enough to deal with this. So my question to you is, what solutions do you have in mind to correct this disadvantage that the Mediterranean ports face? You talked about legislation, new legislation. I'm wondering whether the ETS will be overhauled for the maritime sector, because as it is structured now, there is a high risk of relocation, capital moving from Europe to other parts of the world. All you have to do is just not go to European ports and you don't have to pay any taxes. Interruption.
I want to be very clear with you, Mrs. Sint. I take carbon leakage very, very seriously because, as you all know, 70% of EU global trade happens through our ports. So we need to protect our ports. So carbon leakage is something that we will deal with. I will cooperate also closely with the Commissioner on climate on that matter. But you should know that in order to have, we are monitoring the situation, of course, and we have data. We continue to have data all the time in order to follow this situation. But if we really want to find a solution that will end this carbon leakage, we have to take global measures. This is why I will take the issue in the IMO. I remind you that 2025 is a very important year because the IMO, and we will be present there as representing the European Union, we will make sure that the IMO will agree on specific target by 2050 to decarbonize the maritime sector. So if we have global measures, then we don't have any problem with carbon leakage. However, we will not stop there because until then, we need to find how we will deal with it. I remind you, and as you very well know, there is a list of ports, non-EU ports, that we do not consider to be ports that can be considered as stops between a very long trip to the EU. It's the case of Tangier, it's the case of Port Said. So I think in the revision of this list, we will need to include even more ports, especially of the part of the northern African peninsula, of the South Mediterranean area.
Mr. Commissioner, I ask you one more time to respect, all of you, please, the speaking time. I don't want to switch off microphones. I give the floor to Kosma Zlotowski from the ECR. Thank you.
Καλησπέρα, κύριε Τσιτσικόστας. I'm here. Szanowny panie komisarzu,
Dear Commissioner, under TNT revision, the basic network was extended by the project for the so-called Central Airport in Poland. Do you know this project? Do you know what it means also in military terms? What is the position of the Commission on that? Will the Commission follow the development of this project? Now, my second question is that the European Tribunal has decided that we need to give up this rule that lorries have to go back to their countries of origin once every 6 weeks. What do you think about this? Now, digital services are now focused in the hands of producers. Microphone has been cut off.
I have switched off the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Zlotowski, and for your very good Greek. Yes, I do know the situation of the CPK airport. First of all, let me start by saying that you know that the current airport of Warsaw is within the core network of the TEN-T. The CPK is indeed included in the extended network of the TEN-T. I think it's an important airport, not only for civil, but also for military reasons, due to its geographical position. I will discuss with the Polish authorities on this matter, because as you know, it's the Polish authorities, Polish government that will decide the timing and the way of implementing this project. But I will discuss with them as soon, if confirmed by you, as soon as I get in office. And of course, I will work not only with you about the CPK airport, but also with other colleagues of the TRAN committee in order to see if there are projects, sensitive projects in other regions of Europe of interest to see if we can incorporate them either in the extended or the comprehensive networks, for which we will start already working for. Return of the track, let me tell you that the decision is here now. The Commission never supported this proposal. I'm not planning to take any legislation. I will monitor if there is no problem with the working conditions. I will not do something, otherwise I will act accordingly. We need to have fair conditions for workers, and the data of vehicles, if I understood well your question, I think indeed it's key for businesses. We need to implement the recently revised directive on intelligent transport system and allow this data to be used.
Marianne Zarek from the Renew. Thank you.
Thank you. You stress the importance of tourism for the economic prosperity of the European Union. In your own member state, during your tenure as governor, you mentioned that you have successfully promoted your region as a top tourism destination of Greece. You also mentioned that the EU must maintain its position as the number one tourist destination in the world. During your mandate, will you work alongside DG GROW in order to ensure that disproportionate restrictions to the provision of touristic services will be avoided, taking into consideration the relevant case law of the European Court of Justice, such as the Calais Apartments decision and EU legislation, namely the Services Directive? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your question. And I want to say, first of all, that I'm really honored to be the first commissioner explicitly for tourism in the European Union's history. And I'm really looking forward to working with you, the TRAN committee, and the task force that you have created in order to make sure that we keep the European Union being the #1 destination in the world. Having said that, indeed, through my experience as governor the last 10 years, we have worked a lot on tourism. I believe that we need to transform the local and regional authorities in destination management organizations. In other words, not only dealing with how to promote a destination, but also in how to manage the flows, the incoming tourism, and issues like the ones you raised earlier. I also understand that tourism today has been funded by several different programs, and this can cause issues for the reasons you mentioned earlier. What we need to do in the new MFF, not only ask for adequate funding for tourism, but also to make sure that we simplify the rules and the way that stakeholders, SMEs, and local administrations can get a hold of the funding on tourism. So we need more targeted budget. We are talking about increasing the awareness of the people involved, and I really believe that the link between transport and tourism is very strong, and we can really promote the effort to have a sustainable tourism sector by the end of this mandate. This is why I will present the EU Sustainable Strategy for Tourism, which will be based on the EU Agenda 2030.
Vivian Costanzo from the S&D.
Yeah, now it's working. Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking in German today. Wir haben auch schon ganz
Now, we've heard quite a lot about the TEN-T, and I have a question about the implementation. And there's always this question about cross-border rail traffic, especially when you're talking about the DAC or the harmonization of the ERTMS. And we've heard a lot of regions with older rail infrastructure. So there's been delays, there have been problems with introducing ERTMS with the older rail infrastructure. So is there going to be special funding in the next 5 years for this? Now, the other question, competitiveness. We've heard a lot about this recently. Now, we're talking about rail traffic. How is the Commission going to incentivize the member states to reduce fees in order to reduce the costs of using these rail and make them more competitive?
Thank you, Ms. Costanzo. We already have a strong framework in place to increase the shift to rail, and I will work to implement and enforce the existing rules that already are here. However, to address these issues, we need first of all to ensure the proper implementation and the enforcement of the fourth railway package. We need to find an agreement on the regulation on the railway capacity. We need to put forward a plan for an ambitious European high-speed network, as I said earlier. We need a proposal for single digital booking that will come early in the mandate. We need to support the rollout of DAC, of the digital automatic coupling of trains. We will revise the train drivers directive, and of course, we will support the uptake of digital technologies in the sector. Now, when it comes to the economic aspect of your question, I will tell you that we have measures that incentivize rail indirectly, like, for example, the ETS and the Energy Taxation Directive that has been in place for some months now. This way, we can create a level playing field for all transport modes. But I will work with you as TRAN committee and with the members that are interested, because there are many members interested in this aspect, in order to find the best ways to propose to other commissioners as we're in college to make this shift a success. Thank you.
Tom Berenson from the EPP, please.
Yes, dear Commissioner-designate, it will be no surprise my question is about the port strategy, because we call our ports the gates to Europe, but we gave away the keys to China. And that's why this Parliament called upon the previous Commission in the previous mandate to present the European port strategy. And I'm very happy to see that you commit to this. We as EPP have a suggestion for you. Don't stop at a communication. We need a package of concrete legislative proposals with real impact to strengthen our ports. The FDI proposal was a first step, but we're wondering what further measures will you propose to make sure that the member states reduce risks and that we avoid a race to the bottom of European ports in particular China benefits. So in short, I would like to know, what can we expect from your proposal and what will it include? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berendsen. And let me start, first of all, by congratulating you for the European Parliament resolution on January 24 on the ports. We also recognize, as I said, the Ninisto report, which underlines the importance of maritime security. And if we want to be pragmatic, the port security is very important for the EU sovereignty. So indeed, this will be the exact scope of the port strategy that I will bring forward. First of all, to ensure strategic independence, especially from third countries, including cybersecurity. Second, the overall resilience of the transport infrastructure, namely the port, the connections, the supply chains, because we need to make sure that they are resilient. Thirdly, the competitiveness of the European ports. And we also need to reflect on the energy transition. We need to include hubs of energy production in our ports. We have the means to do that with offshore wind, with hydrogen and other technologies. And of course, we will address shortages of labor and upgrading of the skills of the workers in our ports. Now, financing is indeed a key. We will involve, other than EU funds, also private and public money, and this will come within 2025, so the first year of my mandate. And we will have a screening mechanism, as you already know, in the countries for foreign direct investments that are happening in critical sectors. And I will continue working with the Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner-designate, please. Jutta Paulus from the Greens.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Commissioner-designate, for being here with us. I'm very glad to hear that you're very motivated to fulfill what we started in the last mandate. And my first question is around the maritime issue. You said that you want to fulfill refuel EU maritime and also refuel EU aviation, so these two are connected. What is your plan in order to make sure that we have the necessary ramp up of the e-fuel production and also the SAF production within the EU so that the sector will have investment clarity? And the second question, how do you envisage to put more emphasis on wind propulsion? The more modern ways of wind propulsion could save us a lot of money and fuels and bring us forward on our climate goals. Thank you very much.
Well, let me start first with the wind propulsion, Ms. Paulus, because I find it actually a very interesting technology. And we already grant recognition to the wind propulsion, as you very well know, under Fuel EU Maritime. And we recognize that we still need to assess a little bit more on how this technology works and measure the actual contribution to the goals that we have. So I count on the work of researchers, of course, for this, and in the context of the European Sustainable Shipping Forum, which you know very well. At a global level, I will continue engaging with the IMO to promote wind technologies. In my opinion, they should be accounted for in the fuel standard that we are promoting within the IMO and, of course, at the EU level. Coming to your other question on fuels, we all know that the fuels for aviation, the fuels for maritime are totally different from the situation that we face on transport on road. So we need to work a lot into incentivizing investments and having investment clarity in order to have investors investing in the creation of alternative fuels, SAF and other technologies, of course, for maritime. This is why I announced earlier today that I will create the STIP mechanism, the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. Exactly the scope of the STIP, and you will see the details when we will discuss it when it comes. I'm willing to address these issues mainly for the fuels on air transport and maritime transport.
Borja Jimenez Laras, please, from the EPP.
Señor TZITZIKOSTAS, la aplicación del fuel.
Thank you. The EU fuel, maritime, refuel aviation and the ETS have had a negative impact on the competitiveness of European ports and airports when compared to third country ports and airports. There are special clauses to avoid certain behaviors, but they're taking place. There are certain routes that are now going through North Africa. We have to act or it's going to be too late to tackle this. Now, as you said, military mobility is extremely relevant. We don't invest enough money. There have been 4 budget cuts by the Council. How are we going to avoid this happening again? And now the terrible floods in Valencia. What plans does the European Commission have to allocate funds to reconstruct and improve transport infrastructure? And how are we going to make sure that the funds are used properly to increase resilience in the face of future natural disasters? Thank you.
Thank you. I will try 3 questions in 2 minutes. I will start with Valencia, of course, to tell you that, as I said in my opening remarks, we will stand by Valencia and the situation that you are dealing with. The Commission as a whole is looking for funds at this moment to see how we can support Spain and Valencia. When it comes to us and the CEF, you know very well that we have concrete projects from Valencia in the CEF and the TEN-T. I will make sure that these are going to become very flexible. I know that the timeline now cannot be followed. I know that it's very difficult to conclude the works. Many of them will have to start from scrap, from zero again. So we will be very flexible with you, with the timelines and how we will move forward. And of course, we will cooperate to see how we can construct them better in a more resilient way and how we will find money from the new MFF to address issues. Now, when it comes to carbon leakage, as I told you, I take it very seriously. We will have a biannual reports that we will present here in the Council and in the Parliament. We conduct background studies to make sure that we have all the data available. But again, it's the Member States' responsibility to oversee that. If they don't do it, I will certainly consider remedies. As simple as that, because it's an important matter. Finally, on military mobility, 1.7 billion is not enough. Okay? This is obvious. We will have negotiations with the next MFF. I've already discussed with the Commissioner of Defense, and we agree on that. And I will have this clear plan for military mobility for the next decade after I consult with NATO.
Now, Mrs. Elena Kundura from the left.
I'll be speaking Greek. Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS, one of the key goals that you have set yourself is to boost the connection of European capitals through high-speed rail and to boost rail freight transport. However, the current state of the network in many member states requires considerable investment in up-to-date safety infrastructure. In Greece, the tragic accident in Tempe brought to light very serious Greek rail safety gaps, which are still there. Only a few months after the accident, the ERA, the European Railway Agency, drafted detailed findings sent to the European Commission mentioning serious rail safety breaches. It seems that the conclusions are that the Greek government violated European rail safety rules. How are you going to make sure that the Greek railway network is equipped with up-to-date and modern infrastructure? And if you become commissioner, will you commit to publishing and adopting the ERA findings? And also, if the findings are confirmed and breaches are confirmed, are you going to carry out your institutional duty by starting infringement proceedings? Thank you.
Το τραγικό δυστύχημα...
Mrs. Kundera, the tragic Tempe accident should have never happened. 57 people lost their lives. And this is a very serious issue for me, because even though it didn't happen in my region, and even though I wasn't responsible in any way in managing what happened before and after the accident, despite this, most of the people on the train were going back to Thessaloniki after their holidays. They were going back to Thessaloniki. I myself know 3 families who lost their children. My personal secretary lost a very close relative, and I witnessed this tragedy unfolding. Honourable members of the committee, I can assure you, and all the victims' families, that I will not hesitate for one moment. If I am confirmed as commissioner and if I get an official report on this, I will assure you that I will not hesitate to act in line with the European legislation within the Commission. And I can assure you that I'm not going to deviate from the actions that are enshrined there. I want this to be crystal clear. Please note what I said. I mentioned this in my introductory statement. Safety is my key priority. Please have no doubt about this. Please do not doubt that I will come down hard on all member states and, of course, Greece, to make sure that they implement the works that are necessary so we can avoid such accidents in the future. Thank you. There is someone who is giving out papers, giving out documents during the meeting. You are interrupting our meeting, so please refrain from this. What you are doing is not allowed because you're interrupting the hearing. Mr. Scheider is next.
I have one question. As you mentioned, the taxation issue. There is also a necessity of the revision of
Excuse me. I interrupt the meeting. Παρακαλώ να σταματήσει αυτό το...
I think that what is happening has to come to an end now. Please stop. Please stop what you are doing.
Σεβαστείτε τη συνεδρίασή μου.
Please respect our meeting. You are a colleague. I would like to ask you to leave the room. Now. What's going on? What you're doing isn't right. Please leave the room now.
Παρακαλώ, συνοδεύστε.
Please accompany the lady. Please take her outside.
Είναι ντροπή αυτό που...
This is shameful. This is shameful. I would really like to have our colleague be taken out of the room.
Παρακαλώ. Τι περιμένετε για να...
What are you waiting? What are you waiting? Please take her out of the room.
Mr. Cedar, excuse me, you have the floor, sir.
So, thank you. One question will be if there will be a revision of the directive on taxation of energy products, which will also give an end to the unequal tax treatment of planes and trains and the introduction of a kerosene tax. My second question would be if you could be, Commissioner-designate, a little bit more concrete on the corporate fleets. For example, will be the a legal proposal and will it also include cars, vans and trucks? And then my last point is also, as we spoke very often about jobs in transport industry and speak about cars, we should not forget that also the jobs in the rail industry are very huge and important ones. And therefore, I also want to underline how important it is to also establish a more dense network of regional transport and especially public transport. And what is your opinion on this? Thank you.
Please, can you, because of the, I didn't hear the first question.
Was on tax, different taxation on between planes and trains and kerosene tax and things like this.
Yeah, and the question is what?
If there will be a revision of the tax directive to end this unequal taxation between trains, planes and other means of transport.
Okay, thank you very much. On corporate fleets, as I said earlier to Mr. Tegerhoff, I am planning to bring this. We will discuss this initiative. It's too early to commit on which exactly form this will have, whether it's going to be through incentives, whether this will be legislative or not. We will give me some time, if confirmed today, to see the matter and discuss with stakeholders and find the best possible solution for this initiative. When it comes to regional connections, if I understood well, your question is about, because there was a lot of noise in the room, it was about how I will make sure that remote areas are well connected. Is that the question? Yes. Well, as I said earlier, we will use cohesion funds. We will use funds from the TEN-T network, the extended and the comprehensive, to make sure that no place is left out. It's for me number one priority. And of course, we need to address the unequal taxation. We have to have a level playing field. And I will work with the commissioner responsible for taxation to see what we can do in this respect.
Mr. Lordanelli from the Patriots, please.
Monsieur le Commissaire. Commissioner-designate, a question on the Commission's will to force automotive manufacturers to have binding targets. So you will ban new combustion engines from 2035. It's a unilateral decision by the Commission to not apply the revision clause. So that is going to be harmful. Electric vehicles are very high, and that means Europeans won't be able to get around. You've often been there on behalf of regions, but people in rural areas should not be made second-class citizens because they won't be able to get around because they'll only have electric vehicles. And it's an arbitrary deadline. The market is dominated by the Chinese, so you're pushing the European industry into the abyss. So there have been a lot of concerns about punitive environmentalism in the car industry. So will you push back the 2035 deadline, and will you change what you've decided on the combustion engine?
Mr. Leonardelli, I stated very clearly earlier that we have specific rules and goals that we want and we need to obtain, and we have to stick to the plan. Otherwise, the message that the European Union will convey to our competitors, but also to our internal market, is not a message of stability. and trust. So we have these decisions that are decided now, and we need to make sure that the transition will happen the smoothest possible way. I don't share your opinion on the fact that electric cars are not going to be a technology for everyone. We know all very well that the technology is going forward. There are many companies, I know at least two, that in 2025, this next year, they will present their first cheap models, electric models, that will be easy to obtain for every family. And at the same time, we need to use funds from the social environmental fund in order to be able to, after having seen the national plans, of course, of the member states, to help address transport poverty. So, when it comes to China, I will repeat to you that I'm fully aware of the situation. I believe that the duties that we have put are in the right direction, and I will be in close collaboration with the Commissioner on Trade to see how we can, if needed, increase the protection of our automotive industry.
Mr. Carlo Ciccioli from the ECR, please.
A commissario per I trasporti.
I'm very pleased that since you come from the Mediterranean, you understand our problems. The partial or total interruption of rail from Alps and Mediterranean through the Gotthard Tunnel penalizes Italy and the traffic flow from the north to the south of Europe. Do you think that the EU needs to have tools to ensure better coordination? For example, a way of dealing with these systematic interruptions that cause financial damage to businesses and that are making it more difficult for TEN-T to proceed. Do you think that by 2030 we'll need 500 billion euro for the central rail line? Only 20 billion euro are allocated up to 2027. We have to increase the amount allocated to rail. We have to harness EIB funds and use private funding. What actions are you planning to take?
Let me start, Dr. Ciccioli, from the Alpine region, which is of utmost importance for European commerce and movement of single market. Why? Because it's in the center of Europe and about 45% of freight is transported through this area. So yes, indeed, it is very bad that we have this situation with a series of issues there, including the Frejus Tunnel, that was caused by natural events. But I have to tell you that already there is a contingency plan for transport that guides this situation and that allows member states to inform each other when there is a problem and to deal with it together. And I will make sure that when we have issues like this, the Commission will be present. So indeed, also for this issue, I will discuss and engage with the member states to make sure we have a solution quickly and promptly. But we understand all that we need to move, it's about time, to a climate-proof infrastructure. We saw what happened in Valencia. We see what happened in many areas of the European Union because of climate change. So we need more resilient infrastructure, and we need to work in this direction. Now, when it comes to the funding of TEN-T, yes, indeed, CEF was 27 billion euros, of which 1.7 was for the military corridors. We need, in the new MFF, to together manage so as, in the negotiation, transport gets the funds that will allow it to complete the TEN-T network. And I will give this fight with you, with the members of this committee. I need your support.
Valérie Delvaux from the Renew.
Monsieur le Commissaire-designate.
Commissioner-designate, as part of the transition to electric vehicles announced in 2024, how will you ensure that we roll out the infrastructure needed on European roads? As we move to more electric vehicles, we have to acknowledge that it's an industrial revolution too. In your mission letter, there's got to be a strategic plan for the automotive sector. So given this background, how will you help industrial sites and how will you help employees who are producing on the line, are those who are producing gearboxes or things which are going to disappear? How are you going to help those workers?
Ms. Delvaux, I had a problem with, I didn't hear you. Can you please repeat, especially the last part?
La dernière partie.
The last part was about how you're going to support industrial sites and factories. There we have the thermic value chain, which is probably going to disappear. These people are producing things such as gearboxes.
Yes. Well, again, the automotive sector is facing a lot of issues, and all transitions are difficult. It's very clear that we are under a transition. So, as much as I said earlier that we need to stick to the plan, to the measures that we have, that we need to obtain, I will tell you that we also need to help and support our industry. So we need to find ways and we need to find funding that will allow us to help the automotive sector make the transition and be able to obtain the goals that we have set. It is not an easy task, I know, but we are here, we have the European plan, which is very important, and we believe that together, by implementing policies supporting companies like the one that you just described, by giving incentives or by supporting in other ways, we will be able to go through this transition smoothly, or at least the smoother way possible.
Nicolina Bergnac from the EPP, please.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner-designate, it is great to see tourism under a remit, and Commissioner for Sustainable Transport and Tourism is what EPP has been asking for, and other groups have been joining us in making this strong request. So we all know that EU competences in tourism are limited, and so please tell us more concretely, what will you do to support tourism in digitalization and sustainable transition? And you have mentioned SMEs in tourism. How will you help SMEs in tourism go digital? And also, how will you ensure growth, jobs, and long-term opportunities together with our local communities? And finally, the question of all questions is, will you be fighting for tourism to finally get its own dedicated budget line in EU budget? This is a years-old request from TRAN, and we count on you and your energy to finally make it come true. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start with the last part on budget. We know that today, for tourism, there are about 15 billion euros that are allocated in different budget lines and different programs. First, the funding is not enough, so we need to work on that. Second, we need to make it simpler. Why? Because today, SMEs that are in tourism and also local and regional authorities that have main responsibilities on tourism have difficulties finding these funds, accessing them, and using them. So my goal will be, in the next MFF, to have a simpler and a more targeted tourism budget line. Okay? Now, when it comes to the digitalization of the sector, we all know that without digitalization, tourism will not be able to cope with the goals for the twin transition. So indeed, we need to help the digital market. We have a Digital Market Act, as you know, Digital Services Act, which also can help the SMEs, the Platform to Business Regulation. So we have the tools here to help SMEs cope with the digital transition. What I believe that is very important is, in order to maintain the European Union to be the leading destination in the world, we need, and I hope that there is a question maybe later coming up, we need to not only make sure that we have a sustainable tourism, but that we also use all the synergies possible to make this happen in the private and the public sector. So thank you very much for your question, because indeed digitalization is of utmost importance for the sector's competitiveness.
Mrs. Rosa Serrano Sierra from the S&D, please.
Señor candidato a
Commissioner-designate, we believe that mobility is a right, and as you yourself said, sustainable mobility should be accessible and affordable for everyone. We have to make sure that all citizens can buy zero-emission cars and access quality public transport, regardless of where they come from or their economic background. We have something called transport poverty. Transport poverty is something that especially citizens in rural areas are grappling with. They rely a lot on private cars because there aren't frequent and quality public services. You have committed to a recommendation on transport poverty. When will this be published? And are you planning to increase the Social Climate Fund in order to tackle transport poverty? And my last point is that I'm very pleased to hear that the European Commission is looking for funds in order to help rebuild damaged infrastructure in Spain. The floods in Valencia is what I'm referring to. Will the CEF be able to take this into account? Interruption by the chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Serrano Sierra. I will start with Valencia again by saying that yes, the CEF funding is already allocated for this MFF. But we will facilitate Valencia in the timeline, and we will give them flexibility in order to address this difficult situation that the infrastructure is facing now in Valencia. And at the same time, the Commission is trying to find currently funds to help Valencia and Spain cope with this tragedy. Going to transport poverty. Transport poverty is a very important issue. We know by today that 6% of the citizens cannot afford to buy a car. And we also know that transport costs are about 12.5% for each household in the European Union. So we need to address transport poverty because it will help us make the shift and get to our goals of CO2 reduction. The most useful tool to address transport poverty is indeed, as I said earlier, the Social Climate Fund. This is a fund, 85 billion euros, of which 65 billion are going to be European money. The member states are going to present us their national plans. I will make sure that in these national plans, transport is taken under serious consideration, because with the funding from the Social Climate Fund, we can not only address transport poverty, but we can also help urban mobility and support the transition to new technologies. So I will bring a recommendation early in my mandate on addressing transport poverty.
Nina Carberry from the EPP, please.
Commissioner-designate, with the UK now positioned as a third country between Ireland and the EU, securing Ireland's full integration with mainland Europe is essential. What concrete actions will you take to ensure Ireland's resilience, growth and sustainability are protected and strengthened amid these challenges? And how will you address potential efforts by the UK to undercut EU standards on environmental, labour and competition issues for our ports and airports? And also, which specific pieces of EU legislation, transport legislation, will you prioritise with the UK to uphold a fair playing field for our industries? And finally, can you assure us that you will work to address ongoing and future challenges when it comes to cross-border transport between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carberry. I have to tell you that this issue is of great importance to me because indeed Ireland's connectivity post-Brexit is of utmost importance. It's not a country that can be left out. So indeed, England is part of the TEN-T network, as you know. Two basic corridors, Atlantic corridor and the North Sea Rhine Mediterranean corridor. But also, these corridors not only help connectivity, but they help also trade, especially after Brexit. Now, Ireland has several ports as well that are part of the TEN-T network. Dublin, Cork, Shannon, Foynes. These ports are indeed crucial for Ireland, but also for the European Union's trade. And of course, for the transport of goods and citizens. The EU has already strengthened Ireland's connectivity, as you well know, supporting these infrastructure through the CEF, the Connecting Euro Facility. And I will continue if I receive your trust tonight as Commissioner. I will continue to support with investments this strengthening the trade routes and the seamless transport of Ireland to the EU. In relation to the UK, one last word. In my opinion, the full, faithful and timely implementation of the withdrawal agreement needs to be happening, and it's key, in my opinion.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Lazarus, non-attached member.
Doamnă președinte, mulțumesc, domnule.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner-designate. I have two questions. Firstly, concerning Romania, for example. In Romania, there's not insufficient infrastructure. We had a president who always said, no, we don't need to have a motorways. And that's why we don't have big motorways in Romania. And now the problem is we still don't have any serious motorways. And so, and also we have no high-speed rail structure either. And how are we going to be integrated in these two corridors that you mentioned? Secondly, what I've seen that in the Commission, in this committee, we don't talk about tourism that much. Perhaps there are some agencies, perhaps in Ukraine, Moldavia, or Turkey, for example, where the different. We lost the microphone.
Yeah, I didn't quite get the last part because the microphone was not working. I will tell you, I will start with tourism to tell you that I consider tourism to have an equal importance with transport. And after all, transport and tourism are interconnected. So we will talk about tourism these 5 years, and we will talk a lot, because we have a lot of things to do in order to make sure that we have a sustainable and resilient tourism model. Now, when it comes to the TEN-T importance in Romania, I will tell you that, as you know, my predecessor created a task force to oversee the issues of infrastructure in Romania, especially the ones funded by CEF and the European Union. So I will tell you that this task force for Romania will continue. I am planning to keep this task force, which has been, I understand, very helpful to the authorities of Romania, and we will push for timely implementation. Of course, we will give our guiding. We will provide Romania with technical assistance whenever it's needed, and a similar instrument could be potentially used in the context of other member states, because this model of this task force has been very helpful to Romania. So please rest assured that I am here knowing, of course, that the EU budget is not enough and we will need to involve the investment bank as well, but rest assured that I'm here knowing that Romania needs our help and support.
Philippe Olivier from the Patriots.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Commissaire-désigné, je voudrais...
Thank you. I would like to focus on a delay when it comes to inland waterways and maritime transport. I'm glad that you're going to make this a priority. In Le Havre, out of 6,000 containers, only 5 are controlled. There are mafias involved. Europol has talked about this, and yet no initiatives were taken in the previous term. And when it comes to inland waterways, the EU isn't doing anything, while the new Silk Road is something that China is pushing forward with. In Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon, off the Canadian coast, there are attempts to better master the maritime flows. What are your plans? What are you going to do to make sure that we protect our ports from criminal gangs and in order to manage waterways? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Olivier, you know very well that when it comes to issues of maintaining security in the ports, it is the member states that are responsible for that. The European Union cannot deal with protecting our ports from mafia gangs. However, I will be here to monitor the situation and make sure that we include in our port strategy issues concerning safety and security of our ports, because indeed, as I said earlier, the European ports are trading 75% of the whole EU trade. So it's very important not only to have good connectivity, but at the same time to have secure and safe places for our workers and the people that are involved in this chain.
Mr. Andrei Novakov from the EPP, please.
Thank you, President. Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS, it's not me, it's European Transport Committee, it's European transport industry who is asking that questions. When you become a Commissioner of Transport, what you are going to do to address the issue of the shortage of drivers? How you're going to motivate young people or non-qualified people to choose that profession and to become professional truck drivers? And now it's me who is asking. What you're going to do to tackle the issue of the long waiting times on the borders inside Schengen and outside Schengen, which is one of the main reasons makes people don't choose that profession, spending precious family time on the borders waiting for no purpose. So Those are my two questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Novakov. Let me start with the worker shortage that indeed affect all transport modes, especially our truck drivers. There is a study that says that we are missing 500,000 truck drivers today in Europe. So indeed, we need to work on several fronts, do more to improve working conditions, address the current uneven enforcement between member states, and this is something I will look into it very carefully. We need to create safe and secure parking spaces, because as you know, in the TEN-T network, in the regulation, there has to be one secure parking area every 150 kilometers that will be safe for the drivers to spend the night. This is not the case. We need to push member states to continue this work. No, it's 2 minutes. We will push for the accompanying driving scheme that's proposed as part of the review of the driving license directive, which is very important also. Rules for cross-border train drivers, upskilling of the workers in the sector. We need to make the profession more attractive. Only 22% of the workers in the transport sector are women, and only 12% are younger than 30. This needs to change. So, coming to the Schengen, of course we need to put digitalization at the checking points, because that's one of the reasons I want to have, and I will bring this initiative for paperless transport by 2030. But we also need to see, if you allow me to say, the issue of Schengen for Romania and Bulgaria. It's high time, in my opinion, because Bulgaria and Romania have met the criteria of Schengen, and now I support the idea that we move to the next step. This will strengthen, after all, the unity of the European Union. Thank you.
I give the floor to Mr. Attar from the S&D, and I apologize for the order. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. A sustainable tourism strategy is welcome and much needed, but this requires funding and a clear action plan. Would you consider setting up a European Tourism Union similar to the Health Union to pool resources, address shared challenges, and keep Europe as the world's top destination? Second question, tourism has bounced back post-COVID, but also has mass tourism during the peak season. With last year's Palma Declaration in mind, how would you guide Europe from mass tourism to a socially sustainable model? And finally, I welcome your commitment to increase and simplified funding for tourism in the new MFF, but this only starts in 2027. So how would you secure a structured funding for tourism over the next 3 years? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Attar. Indeed, I will tell you that I don't believe that today there is a need for creation of a separate agency. So we don't need, as we were saying earlier, we don't want to create more and more burden. I don't think that today there is a need for such an agency. I believe that there are more urgent issues that we need to prioritize, like funding, as you correctly said. There are funds available now within the current MFF, but of course it's not enough. We need not only to have secured adequate funding for tourism in the new MFF that is coming, but we also need to see how we will collaborate with private investments and, of course, the support of other instruments in order to make sure that we have a sustainable tourism. Because today, indeed, as you rightfully said, there is sometimes an unbalanced tourism in some areas. Just think that only 4 regions in Europe received about 12% of the incoming tourism flows this summer. So this shows us that we need to do several things that will help towards addressing the uneven tourism. What is this? the DMOs, the creation of destination management organizations within the regions and cities. We will help them, we will facilitate them. It's not only about marketing the product, but also managing the destination. Second, we need to find and showcase alternative tourism areas that support, for example, ecotourism and alternative destinations for tourism. And of course, we need to make sure that when tourism income arrives at a society, it is well distributed to all stakeholders, and the tourism does not create problems of sustainability and of resilience in the communities of the destination. I don't have time, but we will come back, I'm sure, later.
And now, Mr. Sinkevicius, former commissioner for the Greens. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for your answers so far. I heard your answer on corporate fleets. But really, for our group, this is a critical question. And as a former commissioner, I can tell you that, of course, the most effective tool that we have is legislation. But taxation is not an answer, because I can tell you that very quickly you will have member states on your back, reminding you of subsidiarity. So we really need to see what are the tools at your disposal. So I would really want to hear from you your take on how we can ensure that we, first of all, help our automotive industry who are crying out for demand, how we ensure that there is available clean fleet for in the second-hand market, and most importantly, that we end up by reaching our Green Deal goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sinkevicius. It's an honor to have the youngest commissioner of the previous college with us, and with great work in the college. But as you know, having worked these past 5 years as commissioner in the college, you know very well that decisions are made in a collegiality way. So it's an issue that we will need to discuss with 2 or 3 other commissioners that have relevant issues for the matter of corporate fleets. What I told you today is that I like the idea a lot. I remind everyone that corporate fleets are about 60% of the total vehicles today in our road. So by adopting the corporate fleets initiative, we will have a quick move to electric vehicles. So, and it's good because, again, it is cars with high mileage, and it is cars that create a second-hand market, which today is one of the problems, that people don't choose electric cars. Bringing prices down. And in this respect, I will tell you that I believe that we certainly need to give incentives, and I cannot exclude that we will see legislation on that matter as well. I will come back to you if confirmed today, after some period of time, when I will be ready, having discussed with my fellow commissioners on more specific answers to how we can make corporate fleet go ahead. But we will.
Thank you. Vasik from the ECR, please.
Thank you very much. I will speak Polish. Chciałbym się pana zapytać.
I would like to ask the following question. How do you see the transport corridor from the Baltic Sea to the Aegean Sea? Do you anticipate any financing for this undertaking in terms of railroad investment? How do you see the rail Baltica, Warsaw, Kaunas, Riga, Helsinki? How do you see this route, which is very important not only in terms of economy but also in terms of our defense? As you come from Greece, I understand that you should be looking at those routes with a very positive attitude, north-south. And would you care to look at the regulations which are against which the transport is protesting?
I didn't quite get the last part of your question. However, I will tell you that in the revised 10T regulation, which has just entered into force, it improves significantly the connectivity with Poland, for example. Today there are 3 corridors that are relevant to Poland. First is the Baltic Sea Adriatic. The second one is the North Sea Baltic. And the third one is the Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Aegean Sea corridor. So all these corridors are very important, especially the BBA. This new corridor is an eastern border for the European Union, and you understand how important that is, not only for the functioning of the single market, but also for military purposes. So it is a corridor that helps the military mobility, and that I am keen in continuing the collaboration that we have with Poland and the other countries involved in order to make sure that these projects of great significance are really functioning correctly and timely. I'm not sure I understood the second part of your question.
I was speaking about the mobility package.
Sorry, you can.
Just to clarify the second question, no? So we will talk later about it.
Mrs. Oihane Martinez from the Renew, please.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much. You said that you will help to build the 10T networks within the deadline, but not every project will meet its deadline. So you've got an ambitious plan to link up capitals with high-speed trains. But how will you force the member states to make the necessary investment so that the 10T is actually developed? You know, we've already got promises on high-speed trains, and that's linked to linking up with territories in rural areas. And how will you ensure that there isn't an imbalance between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean when it comes to key infrastructure such as airports, ports, and train stations? And then what will the Commission do to ensure that if there are penalties for pollution, how will you ensure that that doesn't overly affect the Balearic Islands?
Let me be clear, Ms. Aguirre Martinez, there cannot be uneven dealing with issues in the European Union. We have to evenly deal with everything in the European Union among the 27 member states. That's a very clear message to all. And another clear message is that I am willing to work a lot on this project, on the fast connections with trains. And I don't think we need to pressure anyone because member states will be on board in this project. The data that we have from the liberalization of trains, for example, that started in 2020, show us that we have more routes, faster routes, cheaper tickets, better connectivity. For example, in Spain and Italy, the prices decreased by around 30%. The increased modal share and passengers, increased frequency in France, for example, between 50 and 100%. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I don't think we need to impose it to member states. they understand the benefits of high railway connectivity in Europe. And so we will give them technical assistance, we will give them all the tools, and I'm sure that we will start. It's already happening in Spain, it's already happening in France. There are already examples of a successful high-speed rail connection, which will help us also, by the way, attain the goals that we have on CO2 reduction.
Mr. Siegfried Dröse from the ESN, please.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, in the framework of the EU Green Deals in the area of transport, there have been measures taken to make decarbonization possible, and there's also high costs connected to them. How can you ensure that in the future this kind of measure doesn't overburden the citizens in the member states, especially citizens with very low income? Second question, let me say that you've demonstrated humor today. In your introduction, you said you wanted to create a second-hand market for e-mobility. I don't know if the last time you were at an automobile dealer was, but there's not even a primary market for electromobility in Germany. How are you going to do this? Because used automobiles, usually the problem is the battery, and so I'm not entirely convinced. That would be I would be interested in hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't share the same opinion with you. Indeed, the electric cars market is struggling at this point, but we need to see how we will find ways to make the electric industry, the industry of the automotive industry, basically, to make the transition, as I told you. So we are talking here about a very big industry that has 100 billion trade surplus and 14 million jobs in the European Union. So we need to make this work. How we will make this work? The clean industrial deal that is coming is going to give a lot of answers to that. Within the clean industrial deal, we will have a stable framework for investments that will help make the shift. And at the same time, we need to see the whole value chain. It's not only the cars, it's, for example, the batteries as well, and the charging infrastructure. How are we expecting to have electric cars on the road when they're not cheap, when there is no infrastructure adequate for them to be recharged? So I will work a lot with the member states to make sure that there is adequate infrastructure, electric vehicle infrastructure in the TEN-T network, number one. Number two, we need to find ways like the corporate fleets and other incentives to minimize the costs of the car in order to make it easier for a family to obtain one. And of course, this issue will be also in the industrial action plan for the automotive sector that I will present early in my mandate. We need to boost both the manufacturers and the consumers' confidence if we want to succeed. And of course, we need to, as I said, accelerate and give incentives, accelerate the infrastructure and the automation and connectivity.
Thomas Tobé from the EPP, please.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner-designate. Our truckers in Europe need a safe place to sleep, to take a shower, and also they need, I would say, basic comfort while on the road. And at the same time, we also need to ensure cargo safety on our roads. In Germany, for example, about 26,000 cargo thefts are reported every year. And the TEN-T regulation is clear. Member states need to build safe and secure parking areas for truck drivers along the network. But I would argue that this is going more than slow. So, Commissioner-designate, how do you plan to make sure that member states deliver so that these parking areas are finally built? Thank you.
First of all, let me tell you, Mr. Tobe, that the issue that you're raising is very serious. Because indeed, today, the lack of parking spaces for truck drivers is a major issue for the shortage of truck drivers in the EU. We need today 400,000 parking spaces, safe parking spaces, 400,000. And we have about 10, only 10,000. So the first thing I will do is push the governments, push the member states to start implementing this because it's a regulation. Every 150 kilometers there needs to be a safe parking space, parking area for our working people in the trucks. And this is not only about issues of safety that you mentioned correctly, but it's also about receiving the minimum level of services for the people that are on the road all the time. And sanitary facilities, food, beverages, and so on. And of course, being secure. How can we attract women in the transport sector if they cannot even feel safe when they stop at the parking? Now, of course, we need to work closely with our social partners as well to make sure that everything is taken on board of what their concerns are. This goal of creating the safe parkings is, the deadline is 2040, and I will make sure that we will even get there earlier, because we need to. I will present in the first half of 2025 a report to the Parliament and the Council on the availability of secure parking spaces.
Last speaker for this round is Elena Koundoura from the left.
Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS, the European Union is the leading tourist destination in the world, and tourism contributes to 10% of its GDP, and it employs 27 million people directly or indirectly. But if we want the tourism sector to continue being a leading sector, and if we want it to be competitive, resilient, and more resistant to future challenges, we have to really focus on this, because in its other resolutions, the European Parliament has focused on the need for resilience and sustainable tourism. So what do we want? We want a separate budget line for tourism. We want a European tourism organization. We want a European crisis management mechanism, and we want a strategy on sustainable tourism. So if you are elected as commissioner, will it be a priority for you to unveil a new strategy? Will you support a European tourism organization, and will you support a crisis mechanism, crisis management mechanism, and will you support a separate budget line for tourism?
Κυρία Κουντουρά, σας ευχαριστώ για την ερώτηση.
Mrs. Koundoura, thank you very much for your question. We know each other very well. I was regional governor at the time that you were Minister for Tourism in Greece. And I think that you saw firsthand the important work that we did in Central Macedonia to improve what we offered in the tourism sector, and our efforts to ensure resilient and sustainable tourism. We really worked hard at this. How can this be achieved? We can achieve this by realizing that we've got to respect the environment. We've got to respect the cultural identity of each and every area, and we've got to respect the destination itself. So we've got to work hand in glove with the local and regional authorities and the relevant tourism ministries in order to strike the right balance. But in any case, let me tell you that the 15 billion euro in the European budget are in different budgetary envelopes or in different programs, and that makes it difficult for businesses in the tourism sectors, regional authorities, and anyone else involved in tourism to know how to access them. So we need more money for tourism, but we also need to streamline the whole procedure. I'm thinking about all those involved in the 27 EU member states. I'm thinking about tourism businesses. It needs to be simpler for them to tap into these funds. So we have the tourism sector, and I want to bring everyone together, and I want to have a sustainable tourism strategy. I will push forward with that and work with you and the whole TRAN task force so that we can move forward with these goals in mind. Thank you.
Okay, we've finished the second round. We arrive now to the third round. As you well know, we have the... You cannot, you don't have the floor. You don't have the floor, sir. Please do not interrupt the meeting. Please take your seat. You interrupt the meeting. Please, I don't want to, please. Respect the meeting, sir. Why are you? Order. You should respect the meeting. You are a member of the parliament. Shame on you. You should respect the meeting. Please, why don't you hurry up, please? As you were, and no. As you know, we have the ENVI committee is our invited committee, so I will give the floor directly to the vice chair of the ENVI committee, Mrs. Esther Garcia, for 1 minute, her question to the Commissioner-designate. Thank you. Mrs. Garcia, you have the floor.
Señora Presidenta. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Environment Committee, I would like to put this question to you, Commissioner-designate. In your answer to the written question from ENVI, you said that you would cooperate with the Commission on zero emissions and climate in order to show that the Commission has a united front and wants to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions in the maritime sector and aviation sector. Could you flesh out how you're planning to cooperate with the Climate Commissioner on the whole issue of ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the IMO, the Maritime Organization, in order to make sure that the EU is a leader in the quest to reduce emissions in both sectors? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Herranz Garcia. Indeed, I will have a very close cooperation with the ICAO and the IMO. Global problems need global solutions. So we have to take these issues to IMO and ICAO. And I want to repeat something. This year, 2025, is a very, very important year for the decisions both in ICAO and IMO in order to have clear targets by 2050. And I will be there, we will be there, the European Union will be there to make sure that we obtain the goals that we need. We already have good results from the previous meetings of IMO, but this year, 2025, is crucial for the decisions both in IMO and ICAO. So the IMO plans to adopt global decarbonization measures in 2025. This should include the fuel standard and the greenhouse gas pricing mechanism. And the ICAO, you know that they adopted a global framework on sustainable aviation fuels, the SAF, that was in November of 23. And at this point, I will also work very closely with the Commissioner on climate, as you said. I remind you that here we work with no silos in the European Commission. We have good collaboration. Decisions are taken in the college, and they're binding to all of us. So there is no issue of good collaboration between commissioners. I don't have more time, but
thank you. We have now reached our final round of questions, where one member per political group will ask a question. And we start in reverse order. With the ESN, I give the floor to Mr. Dreze.
Herr Commissioner, I was not convinced by what you said in the second round, so a new approach. You spoke about tourism. You want to be a commissioner for tourism. I don't think we need a commissioner for tourism. The national states do that very well on tourism, but you want to be commissioner tourism. But you should know that tourism is linked to national identity and culture. Well, how will you ensure that EU initiatives will not affect cultural legacies and the cultures of member states? So I hope that you will not try to have an EU identity. There is no such thing as an EU identity. I hope that you won't try to implement an EU identity or to force that. How will you ensure that national cultural identities and regional identities are respected? Thank you.
Mr. Dresse, there is not one European identity, but there are many European identities, national identities, becoming one in the European Union. This is what the European project is all about. This is what we pro-Europeans believe. Yes, of course, the countries, the regions, the cities, the villages, the islands keep their own characteristics, of course. But that's through the richness of the European Union, because we can be a big family with different identities. So, believe me when I say that I want to work to promote the European Union as a leading destination of the world. And you know why we can do that? Exactly because we have different identities throughout our continent, throughout our regions, our cities. We have a rich culture, different cultures. The European Union is a superpower in culture. And this is why I believe that we can maintain the leading role, the leading position in tourism worldwide by promoting and showcasing to the world all these different cultures, these different identities. And of course we will respect the identities of each place. In tourism we are talking about destinations. We are not even talking about countries or regions, but destinations. And so I'm keen in promoting the different destinations, but I also want to bring up the destinations that are less promoted all these years. Destinations that work on ecotourism, on alternative tourism, because this way we will enlarge the period of tourism and we will make sure that we remain a leading force in the world.
Mr. Saidi from the left.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner-designate, you said that transport is the only sector that hasn't managed to reduce its emissions. If we want to achieve our climate targets by shifting freight from road to rail and achieve other Commission goals, then it's urgent to reverse this trend. In fact, this shift towards the rail hasn't taken place, and we seem to be authorizing behemoth trucks, huge lorries. So this policy has failed. If we want to have a solid and constant rail supply, are you going to change the dogma of your predecessors, where competition is the most important, where rail freight has suffered and so many jobs have been lost? Commissioner, are you going to support and develop European public operators and have historic operators work together instead of competing, instead of having them compete against each other? Thank you.
Mr. Saidi, I believe in the liberalization of trains, and it's not something that comes without data. Again, Spain and Italy, the prices decreased around 30% after the 2020 liberalization of trains. In Austria, train frequency increased by 41% after the liberalization. And in France, the frequency increased between 53 and 100%. Having said that, of course, and these are data that the Commission presented with a study 1 month ago. They're very recent data. So the problem of rail is not the opening of the market. The problem of rail is insufficient funding for infrastructure, is the lack of interoperability, the lack of connections, the capacity allocation, the non-availability of rolling stocks, and of course, the inadequate ticket offer that we have today, as well as the fact that we have different gauge in different countries that do not allow cross-border communication of trains. So I will work on the implementation and the enforcement of the fourth railway package. I will work with you to find solutions on regulation on the use of railway capacity, as I said earlier to Ms. Costanzo. And I will at the same time put forward a plan for these high ambitious, high-speed connections between capitals and big cities of Europe, and the single digital booking and ticketing regulation, which I really think will help this transition. But border obstacles persist, and we need to work on that, and I will be very happy to collaborate with you in this respect and find how we can help railway in Europe.
Mrs. Lena Schilling from the Greens.
So we talked a lot about investments in infrastructure today. That's good, but in fact, people have to be in the center of all the policies. You mentioned the 20,000 deaths on the road yearly. So what concrete measures do you envisage to advance to Vision Zero targets? Would you consider a recommendation on speed limits, which would also tackle the overall emissions? And second, on tourism, we know it's the third largest socio-economic sector in the EU. However, the labor market segregation is a huge challenge. So can you commit that your DG will take a gender perspective while allocating funds? In short, make sure that through gender budgeting, public funds are fairly distributed to reach all people equally.
It goes without saying that I agree with this position you just expressed. We need equality, we need to support equal treatment of workers, of women, of young people. I told you the data that we have and that we need to work on it because we need to make sure that there is intergenerational fairness, gender mainstreaming. I will work with the Commissioner responsible for these issues as well, because it's cross-cutting objectives for the Commission across all policy areas. And at the same time, I know that we have Women in Transport platform that I'm willing to work with. We have the ambassadors for diversity in transport that, again, I will support and collaborate with them. And as I said earlier, I will organize the first 100 days of my mandate. I will organize a youth dialogue because I want to see what young people have to say about transport and tourism. But I want to ask you for the first part of the question, please, if you can repeat it, because there was a problem, Madam Chair, with this.
I will make it short. It's about road safety. So you mentioned the 20,000 deaths we see yearly. And I wanted to ask you if you would consider a recommendation on speed limits, which would lower it and also decrease the carbon emissions.
Thank you very much. Well, very quickly, the speed limits is an issue that national governments deal with. It's in their remits, in their responsibility, either governments or regions and cities. And we have seen that when you decrease within the cities the speed limits, it helps a lot vis-à-vis accidents and even deaths. What we can do is provide the data to the member states, but it's for them and the cities or regions to decide on whether they will choose to enforce the existing speed limits or change them.
Mrs. Benoit Cassard from the Renew. Thank you.
Monsieur le Commissaire-designate.
Commissioner-designate. I want to talk about the protection of animals during transport. Farmers and transporters think that if you change the legislation on animal transport, then we need to have a scientific analysis first. If you ban long-distance transport of animals, wouldn't that have a negative impact on the sustainability of European livestock breeding and on our farms and on our competitiveness of food production in Europe? If you ban us from sending cattle to Lebanon and Morocco, we would lose clients. And actually, it would worsen things, because they would get the cattle from Brazil and Australia and get that in Morocco and Lebanon instead. So shouldn't we look at animal welfare from a global perspective? Don't continue to penalise European farms and businesses.
Mr. Cassard, this is a very interesting topic. And to me, it's also very important, because I believe that animals should be treated in a decent way in transport. You know very well that animal welfare is not under my responsibility. We will have a commissioner on animal welfare and health. So I will collaborate with him to see how we can find the right balance, at the same time making sure that there is a certain quality, a certain level of protection for the animals, but at the same time that this will not hurt our competitiveness and our economy. And we can do both. We can improve animal welfare and safeguard competitiveness. We also need to see the working conditions of our drivers, the drivers that do these transfers of animals. And I'm sure that there is sufficient, by now, willingness of the member states to improve the situation. But the truck drivers that transport animals need to be well trained. And of course, this is why they are already required to have specific training on animal transport, because this will also help increase the level of how animals are treated during transport. So I will work with the Commissioner of Health and Animal Welfare, and we will soon bring results to the table that will take under consideration the right equilibrium that we need to have.
Andrian Axinia from the ECR, please.
Commissioner-designate, you've made clear that you will address transport poverty during your mandate. What about transport poverty of entire sector, road transport? The road transport sector is losing billions of euros annually in Romania and Bulgaria due to their exclusion from the Schengen area. However, it's not just these countries that are affected. The entire EU road transport industry is suffering. Moreover, significant CO2 emissions are being released as hundreds of trucks remain idle at Schengen borders. While I understand that may fall outside your direct portfolio, do you intend to collaborate with the Home Affairs Commissioner to expedite Romania and Bulgaria's accession in Schengen area and address these challenges? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Axinia. I believe that Romania and Bulgaria have met all the criteria for the Schengen membership. And I will work, of course, it's not in my remit, it's in the responsibility of the Commissioner for Home Affairs and Security, but I will discuss, and I believe that the extended Schengen rules should be extended to the internal borders. This will boost economic growth, it will strengthen the unity of the European Union, and it will finally bring an end to this issue. Now, when it comes to the targets of the CO2 emissions, let me repeat. The targets are very specific. The targets have been agreed. We need to stick to the plan, and we will stick to the plan, but at the same time, we will make sure that the industry, which had long-term certainty and predictability because of the measures were announced much earlier, will be supported. And the people who work in the automotive sector will also be supported by skilling and reskilling. We consider, because I talked earlier about technological neutrality, and I said we need to use all the modes that are here. We will consider in the renew of the 2026 the inclusion of e-fuels as well. So you understand that the automotive sector, and this is a goal that I have, we have to make everything in our power to make it survive. And the automotive industrial plan that I will bring will give answers to all these skepticism that you might have.
Rachel Blom from the Patriots.
Dank u wel. We kunnen de impact van de Green Deal op de Europese...
Thank you very much. The impact of the Green Deal can be seen on European industry. We cannot deny the impact of the Green Deal on industry. Manufacturers are no longer competitive. Electric vehicles will not be affordable for citizens. Citizens will be sidelined. So we will see factory closures. We will see job losses. I think what has been done has been disastrous. So I want to ask you, what can be done to ensure that other sectors don't suffer in the same way, don't suffer the same left-wing policies? Will you listen to the rest of the transport sector to ensure that we have realistic, affordable plans that can actually be implemented? How will you actually help citizens and the transport sector so that there is a strengthening of their economic position? Thank you.
Let me reassure you, Ms. Blom, that no citizen will be sidelined. As I said earlier, the Social Climate Fund, which is adequate funding, will be used in order to address transport poverty, in order to make sure that no one is left behind in transport. And at the same time, we will make sure through the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan that I announced and I will bring early in my mandate, that we will have the right investments for alternative fuels, mainly for air transport and maritime. So, believe me when I say that there is no reason to be worried. We will work very closely with all the stakeholders, with the businesses. I will continue the dialogue with the industry. It is one of the first things I will do if I get your trust tonight, and I am Commissioner. One of the first things I will do is discuss, continue the dialogue with the industry, build on the existing renewable and low carbon fuels alliance that has done an incredible job. The alliance, I remind you, is a collective effort, including industry leaders, technology providers, finance providers, society organizations. So I will push for a focus on aviation and maritime sustainable fuels. Private-public partnerships, sustainable fuel allowances, even a sustainable fuels bank are issues that we should consider in this respect.
Mr. Matteo Ricci from the S&D.
I will speak Italian. Presidente TZITZIKOSTAS.
Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS, I listened to your answers with great interest. Your answers show that your priorities converge with those of my group, from the Green Deal to the social protection of workers. However, I have a very specific question to put to you. Because without appropriate funding, there is no future. You talked about high-speed trains and TEN-T. This costs about 60 billion euro. If then you add the Just Transition Fund, then it's clear to all of us that the CEF, the Connecting Europe facility, falls short of what we need. It's insufficient. What do you think of the Draghi report that talks about 800 billion euro per year if we are to regain competitiveness? What is your opinion of a permanent mechanism similar to Next Generation EU that will allow for permanent funding? And also, how are we going to fund the competitiveness fund announced by President von der Leyen? Now, this rule that every 6 weeks lorries have to go back home, this was quashed by the European Court of Justice. I was wondering whether you could talk about the results over the last year and a half, if you could provide your analysis of this. Thank you.
Well, there was a study that indicated that when it comes to the issue of the return of the trucks, we had indeed high environmental cost and high infrastructure damages. So indeed, it was not an initiative that was good either for the environment or the infrastructure of Europe. So this is why the Commission from the beginning was against this proposal. And again, I will repeat that I don't see any reason for new legislation now, but we will assess the conditions of the workers, and if there is a difficult situation in the level of the working conditions, then I will intervene, okay? Now, when it comes to the funding, Mr. Ricci, please understand that indeed, in order to complete all these important TEN-T networks, there is a need for huge amounts of money and of funding. Draghi report, 800 billion, 500 billion only for the core TEN-T network. But I would tell you that we need to prioritize. If we don't make priorities, and find funding for these priorities, we will not make it. And in my opinion, the priorities that we have are competitiveness, the twin transition and how we will make it happen, the resilience of our economy, and so the sustainability, the connectivity that we need to have through 10T networks, the military mobility, and the transport infrastructure, because without transport infrastructure, we will not be able to have a functioning single market and good connectivity for our citizens.
Last speaker, Mr. Jens Giesecke from the EPP.
Yes, thank you, Chair, Commissioner-designate. As EPP, we have clear expectations. For us, competitiveness and technology neutrality are key, full stop. I heard commitments to our EPP request, strengthening military mobility, English as a fallback language. At least you did not exclude it. On the European port strategy, you propose concrete legislation. The fight on carbon leakage on ports and airports, very fine. What I liked very much, your promise on digitalization, paperless transport till 2030. But you are a clever guy, of course, because you are elected just for 5 years. I need your commitment till 2029. So this you have to deliver still. We are elected for 5 years as well. So let's have there a common approach. I want to tell you, continue. In my impression, you have been all over the place the last 7 weeks. What we need, this commitment, the next 5 years. So stay with us the next 5 years. That would be your commitment we need in order to make real progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Giesecke. It's true that I want to commit to whatever I said today. You should take them as commitments on my behalf. And paperless transport, it is something that I will put forward in the fastest possible way. And I also want to commit for another thing. I will continue this work that we had with most of you these past months, weeks. Unfortunately, not all of you, because there was no time or our schedules were not in accordance, but I will meet with all of you. And I want you to know that I will be here for bilateral meetings, for questions that the Parliament, the Tran Committee might have. I will appear regularly in the European Parliament's plenaries and committees whenever it's needed. And I would suggest that we also organize missions on the ground. The Tran Committee and the Commissioner on Transport together. So I think we have tools to work together, and we have ways to make these 5 years really matter for our citizens. Transport and tourism is in the everyday life of citizens. And so by working together and by having these set priorities that we have commonly agreed on, we can make a difference these next 5 years. And I'm committed to work with you to bring the results that we need, both in transport and in tourism.
Thank you very much. We are now reaching the closing of this hearing. Thank you all for your questions to the Commissioner-designate and himself for his answers. But before closing the hearing, I will invite now the Commissioner-designate for his final closing statement of no more than 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, honorable members. Thank you for this evening's exchange, which reaffirms that our success depends indeed on collaboration. For me, it is an honor and a privilege to witness firsthand your dedication to sustainable transport and tourism and your commitment to serving the citizens and the businesses of our regions. I fully share this dedication that you have, and I hope I've been able to convey that today. I have listened carefully to your concerns. I have listened to a range of critical issues that you raised, from competitiveness to sustainability, from infrastructure development to workforce shortages and security challenges. So finding a balance is indeed the most crucial task of our time. We must protect our environment. It is a responsibility we cannot afford to neglect. We must strengthen our resilience. We have to prepare our transport and tourism infrastructure and ecosystems to withstand future shocks. Equally, we must enhance on competitiveness. We need to support and protect our people and our businesses, fostering growth, creating jobs, and spreading prosperity. And my commitment extends further. I aim to make lasting improvements to current conditions, elevating our standards and expectations. And my vision is a Europe where mobility is both efficient and accessible, but also sets the global standards for sustainable development. Investing in innovation and infrastructure, completing the TEN-T network, making all transport modes more sustainable, creating a level playing field for our transport industry, reducing fragmentation, cutting red tape, and ensuring that no community or region is left behind. This is how we will achieve our goals in a fast-changing global landscape. And in tourism, our future-focused strategy is to ensure that the sector keeps thriving and to support the industry while preserving the well-being of our local communities and their heritage. Honourable members, I recognize the concerns you have outlined over the very specific challenges your communities face, from automotive jobs to connectivity issues, and from infrastructure to tourism impact. These challenges, and I want you to know this, are very important to me as well. If you confirm my nomination today, I assure you that I will be available to this committee to further discuss the issues, consider possible options, fight for adequate funding, and find solutions together. Regarding safety, I want to repeat what I stated in my opening remarks. Every life lost is an unspeakable tragedy. Knowing that building strong systems, following rules and using modern tools could prevent accidents like these makes this mission even more pressing. Honourable members, having been in your position as former parliamentarian, I understand the importance of close and effective collaboration. And I am confident that by working together, we can make a meaningful difference for the people and the businesses in Europe. And we can create a future of sustainable prosperity and competitiveness in both transport and tourism. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS. Thank you very much, Mr. TZITZIKOSTAS. I would like to remind the TRAN coordinators and the ENVI chair that the evaluation meeting will be held in camera at 22:30 in the room that has been communicated by the Secretariat. Now, I thank you all once again, and the hearing is now closed. Thank you very much.